Good morning and welcome to Resident Director 101. My name is Liz and I hope everyone is doing well today. It is the last day of February and many of you are probably in the middle of RA selection, so I wanted to share some insight about something you may want to consider this time around. Have you ever considered making your RA selection process blind? And I'm not talking about the entire application and interview process, but the selection and placement processes. Several years ago, I was in charge of the RA selection process and had been part of one selection process at that institution. And I noticed that it was very emotional. Staff members were getting heated and walking out of the room. RAs who had been poor performers the entire year were getting rehired just because their bosses liked them. And it was a complete mess. So when I was put in charge of the process the following year, I wanted to do something different, and I settled on a blind process. I explained it to my supervisor, she heard me out, and thought it was a great idea. So a blind selection process removes most of the identifiable data from the candidate's file, and then selections are made based on the key information that remains. And this process went so well that the staff teams were some of the most balanced, well-functioning teams that our department had seen in years. And now whether it was the blind process or not that had an effect on it, we weren't able to find a way to objectively measure that. However, we were overall very pleased with the staff teams, and all of us who supervised RA staffs had a pretty rewarding year. In fact, the team that I supervised that was formed through this blind process was the last RA staff that I ever supervised, and it was one of the two unicorn staffs that I've had in my career. I had a great experience with them. So here is how we implemented the process. It's not difficult, but it does require some planning and can be a bit time-consuming. We first decided what candidate criteria was necessary for us to make a decision. We decided on the candidate's sex, because some of our buildings on campus were single-sex, whether they were a returning RA, how many years they had been an RA, what types of communities they had worked in, like apartment style, first year, upper class, living learning community, themed housing, a summary of the evaluator's comments, the evaluator's recommendation for what type of community they should be placed in, and the candidate's preference for the community they should be placed in. Then we decided on overall criteria for the makeup of all staffs. We wanted, as much as possible, to have an even split between brand new RAs and returning RAs. And we also wanted, as much as possible, to have an even split between males and females. Considering the campus that I worked on was primarily female, we knew that there wasn't going to be an even split between the sexes, and we primarily focused on trying to get that even split in first-year communities. So interviews are done. We are faced with all these folders of data, comments from the evaluators, application materials, resumes, all that. And so to prepare the selection information that we would review at the selection meeting, I enlisted the help of some trusted student aides who worked in the Office of Residence Life, and we created a master spreadsheet of candidates. We tabulated the scores of each candidate through each part of the selection process. So that was application, resume, interview, group process. And we put all the candidates in order based on score, highest score to lowest score. The process we used resulted in a final score of 100. So that was the highest score that you could get. We also included the qualitative information that I mentioned before. And the only person who knew who the candidates were, who knew the name assigned to each candidate, was one of the student aides who did attend the meeting with us. This was a student aide that had been working in the Office of Residence Life for 3 years. They were a graduating senior. We really trusted this person, so we looped them into the process. One by one, we would go through the candidates in score order, starting with the highest score, and then assigning them a particular space on a particular staff. So the process went something like this. We would say, candidate 1, female. They had a score of 99, returning RA with 2 previous years of experience, They've only worked in upper-class residence halls, apartment style. Evaluators said that this candidate was experienced, gave a lot of specific examples in her interview. It's evident that she wants to stay in her current community. She shared a lot of great ideas that will let her continue to be an asset in that community. Candidate wants to be in apartment style. Evaluators recommend that she be placed in apartment style. And we continued to go through the list of candidates using this process, assigning people to the vacancies that we had. And then once we had assigned everyone to a place, we continued to evaluate the remaining candidates for alternate positions. Then, once everyone had a spot, we revealed all the candidates' names to see who would potentially be working together in each community. And now at this point, we reserved the right to make a few changes, and we did. So before we actually started this process, we determined the criteria for changes would be if people were placed on staff together and they had a previous history. So that means they had either been previously dating or currently dating, or people who we know had not gotten along in the past, whether as residents or RAs. We did make a few changes, and some of those were so we could strike a balance between returners who had particular experience and skills that we knew would be helpful when used in a certain setting. And we also made changes with placements that we knew would result in a particularly strong veteran quitting the role because they didn't like the placement. Now, I know some people will hate that we did that and that we should have just gone with the assignments that we made. However, overall, we were trying to create the strongest RA team possible across campus. So even though we took the blinders off at the end, we reserved the right to make any kind of change that we felt would result in the strongest, most cohesive team. And you can do the same thing. If selection drama and the cult of personality is becoming too much of a distraction whenever it comes to RA selection, you may want to consider making your selection process blind.